Well, hello there. Welcome back to my channel, guys. Yes, today I have for you yet again another exciting video. And as you can see, the title suggests, did Abraham keep the 10 commandments? Genesis 26 verse 5 explain. There is no way I could have done so many proof texts, done so many videos on several proof texts that the Seventh-day Adventist Church use to try to promote their teachings, and not look at a verse like this. A verse like this is arguably one of their most popular, and I would say one of the most craftiest argument that they can actually pull right from the Bible and use in, and it's this particular verse. I would say that among all the texts that they can use to try to promote what they're teaching, this is seemingly one of the strongest. And note why I say seemingly, because at the end of the day it's still taken out of context. But if you are able to overcome Seventh-day Adventists and this particular verse that they will use, trust me, every other verse that they can use in the Bible will be a piece of cake. Right? For me personally, this would have been the hardest loophole to actually go over if you're not a person who is very studious or has deep understanding of the Bible, then, so to speak, right? You could easily get fooled by a verse like this. The verse is telling you that God is saying right, that he's going to multiply Isaac's seed, right? And why he's going to do this, if you look from verse 1 to 5, we're not going to read all the verse, but this is the context. God is speaking to Isaac and telling him what he's going to do for him, right? And why he's going to do it? Because Abraham obeyed his voice and kept his charge, his commandments, statutes, and his laws. So when a Seventh-day Adventist, right, see commandments mentioned in this, the first thing that comes to mind, 10 commandments. How do you prove to them that this is not talking about the 10 commandments, or that Abraham wasn't keeping any 10 commandments? Because the scriptures tells us clearly the 10 commandments was at Mount Sinai and not before, right? But here we see a verse saying that Abraham kept God's commandments. Abraham also kept God's laws, and a Seventh-day Adventist is going to take out of this, when it says laws, the moral laws and the 10 commandments being one of them, since the 10 commandments is a moral law or is moral in nature. That is what they're going to say to you, right? How do you prove to them that this is not what the text is actually saying, that Abraham was never keeping any 10 commandments, he was never keeping Sabbath, and so on? It's very easy to actually show this, right? And we are going to look at a few things where this is concerned. Now, in Genesis chapter 26 verse 5, when it says my commandments, there are two words, Hebrew words, used in the Old Testament when speaking of commandments. It is mitzvah and dabar, right? Whenever the word 10 commandments in and of itself is only ever mentioned 3 times in the Old Testament, and for each time it is mentioned, it is the word dabar that is actually used, right? If you look at Deuteronomy, the 3 times that it was used, Deuteronomy 4 verse 13, Deuteronomy 10 verse 4, and Exodus 34 verse 28. If you look at any Strong's Concordance, you're going to see that commandments there, it is dabar, right? And what does dabar mean? Word, thing. Dabar can be translated as word, thing, matter, acts, chronicles, saying, and commandments, right? If you look at this translation from Darby Bible, and you look at it at Young Literal's translation, the Darby Bible will tell you that 10 words, it translated as 10 words. Young Literal translation translate it as 10 matter. It can also be translated as 10 scenes or 10 things, right? Even 10 chronicles too as well. right? Now in Genesis chapter 26 verse 5, when it speaks of commandment, you realize that it's an entirely different Hebrew word that is used, which is mitzvah, right? Mitzvah is the word that is actually used when speaking of commandments there. What does this mean then? If it is that whenever the Bible, the Old Testament is speaking of 10 commandments, it uses the word dabar, common sense will tell you that the fact that it's not dabar that is used in Genesis 26 verse 5, but rather mitzvah, that it's not talking the 10 commandments. This is common sense, and not just common sense, this is consistency. If whenever it is talking the 10 commandments, it uses dabar. If it was the 10 commandments that God was referring to, that Abraham kept his 10 commandments, right? You don't even see the word 10. Whenever speaking of the 10 commandments, it's two entirely different Hebrew words joined together. Dabar and the word for 10, which is Azarah, right? Which means 10. You don't see Azarah, Dabar used in Genesis chapter 26 verse 5. No, so it could never be talking the 10 commandments. Rather, it's Abraham kept my commandments, my mitzvah. So it's not talking 10 commandments. And you know, just because Seventh-day Adventists is stubborn, if they want to continue to play stubborn, they would have to prove and show, they would have to show where in the Bible did they see Abraham actually keeping Sabbath. If you cannot find in the Bible where Abraham was actually keeping Sabbath, you cannot assume that it's the 10 commandments it is talking there. This is just merely an assumption, and it's an assumption that is not warranted. It is not a fierce assumption. Why? For two reasons. There is no evidence of him keeping Sabbath, right? That's one. And two, it's not dabar that is used there, which would mean 10 commandments. So it's not a fair assumption to say that God is saying Abraham kept his 10 commandments when you don't see dabar used, and not only that, you don't see any record of him keeping the Sabbath. No, when it speaks of laws, right, of course, this is their strong, the strong argument that they're going to come with. Law there, really and truly, if you look at the Hebrew word, it is Torah. But guess what? A simple way how you can tie them up. As I've always stressed, whenever the word law is mentioned, it's not talking one section of the law, but the entire thing, all 613 laws. So Torah, the Torah consists of 613, right? Though Moses used Torah there, right? I would say, and this is my opinion, right, as to why Moses used the word Torah there. Because Abraham would have kept some of the laws that would have been in the Torah, even though the Torah was not yet made as a unit. So though the Torah was not yet made as a unit, Abraham kept some of it, right, that would have been given to him in his time. He would have kept some of the laws within the Torah that would have been given to him in his time. Therefore, this is the reason why Moses used the word Torah in that particular verse. Though the entire Torah as a unit would not have existed during the time of Abraham. Right? Let me give some other arguments here to show you that you cannot say that he kept the 10 commandments, right? Simply because there's a Torah mentioned there. The Levitical priesthood and all the laws that surround the Levitical priesthood. I'm sure that every Seventh-day Adventist would agree, right, that they weren't before the time of Moses, because first and foremost there was no sanctuary either. Only an idiot would actually say that Abraham was keeping the Levitical priesthood when it never existed as yet. He was keeping the laws of the Levitical priesthood. The tribe of Levi wasn't even made as yet. They weren't born as yet. Levi didn't even come out of Jacob as yet. So only an idiot would actually say, and I have to say idiot, right, would say that Abraham was keeping the Levitical priesthood. Yet his Torah is used here, and part of the Torah is the laws of the Levitical priesthood. Part of the Torah, you have the Levitical priesthood laws exist in it. So what this is saying to you, just because you see Torah mentioned there, you cannot assume, right, that it's 10 commandments is included. That's just an assumption, because all the laws of the Torah were compiled as a unit during the time of Abraham. You have to use reason and logic and the evidence given to you to find what laws within the Torah, right, that Abraham actually kept, because certainly he never kept all of them. Another case in point, all the laws containing diet laws and so forth, they never exist until the time of Moses. Genesis 9, it tells you that God tell God tell Noah rather, that every living thing that creepeth is food for him. I have a video on that. Those Seventh-day Adventists try to move a mountain to say it don't mean what it is saying, right? I did a video where I showed that they ate anything at all. Diet laws never exist until the time of Moses. So you can't, just because it's the Torah mentioned here, assume that 10 commandments is included. If you're going to make that assumption, you may as well make the assumption that the laws of the Levitical priesthood as well, and all those things he kept also. So if there is no evidence, or the Bible shows, right, if you're going to say Kismar, if a Seventh-day Adventist is going to say Kismar, of course Abraham never kept the laws of the Levitical priesthood, because it never existed, right? But in the same breath, Abraham never kept the 10 commandments, because the 10 commandments was not in existence as yet. The Sabbath was never in existence. The Sabbath law was never in existence until the time of Moses. I've proven this over and over again, and until they can prove that the Sabbath existed before the time of Moses and persons were keeping it, including Abraham, you cannot say that law spoken of here is talking about the 10 commandments. Let me give you a scholar, the reading of a scholar, right, that will tell you how to properly interpret Genesis 26 verse 5, and this is how we are going to close, just from that reading, right? Or rather than read out what J. Gills commentary has to say about how to interpret Genesis 26 verse 5, I'm just going to post it in the comment section for you guys to read. Hear the reading of a scholar and not the teachings of a denomination that is led by a false prophet, right? I would urge you guys to basically check it out, and I assure you that what J. Gills is going to say regarding this verse makes far more sense than what Seventh-day Adventists would want to make out of Genesis 26 verse 5. It is not talking about 10 commandments. It is not saying that Abraham kept 10 commandments or Sabbath or diet laws and so on. None of that. Right? So with that being said, I end this video. If you enjoyed it, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Bye bye now.